Hi, people. Moreno Ravenberg here again. Um, as the header suggests, I'll be talking about a topic that's not the cult related, that's more neutral in nature. And of course, anyone that's willing to weigh in and give his opinion on the matter or her opinions or thoughts on the matter is more than welcome in the comment section. Yeah, so as the header states, it's all about what I'm going to discuss is the inevitable downfall of a powerful entity or organization. Um, it's something that I think most people have seen, of course, but very few are aware of or are consciously aware of. And the question you need to ask yourself in such a situation, with what you're seeing happening in the world and big tech censoring basically and those that they want to censor, the whole quote unquote hate speech thing, you name it. Um, as you've seen, a lot of these companies, we're talking about Facebook, YouTube, etc. These huge companies are literally censoring whomever they want to censor and following their own guidelines and so on, to the point where they're completely unreasonable. And it's basically just, okay, I don't like you. It's simply a matter of saying, okay, I don't like you, I don't like what you're saying, so gone. Okay, or I'm gonna censor you, I'm gonna click on the mute button. And it's also the same thing for to a larger extent for countries even, and their government specifically, silencing and locking people up even. It's like we've regressed into the Middle Ages. And the question that been asking myself, and that's the reason why I made this video, is whether it's possible for any kind of entity or organization, whether it be a government or a country in general, or any kind of organization whatsoever or establishment, to become powerful and grow exponentially to the point where it becomes almost like a world dominant superpower, either literally or figuratively, without collapsing. Because I don't think that that's possible. As the saying goes, what goes up must come down. And it's something that, like I said, that most people have seen, but very few are aware of. It's like a continuous rise and fall of everything. Okay, now of course the world is a cycle, and everything, existence is a cycle, everything is cyclic in nature. And as the saying goes, those that are unfamiliar with the past or with history are doomed to repeat it, which is obvious too. But I think even people that are aware of the past are doomed to repeat it if it's meant to be. um, there is no such thing as free will after all. But yeah, my answer to my own question would be no, to be honest. I don't think it's possible for any establishment or entity to become so powerful to the point where it is almost seen, where it's a world contender, where it's world renowned, without sooner or later imploding on itself. Notice that with all big establishments, okay, let's just give an example: big tech companies, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. I mean, 10 years ago, these companies were doing fine. They were at peak performance. Everyone practically on a global level was using their services, more or less. Everybody uses YouTube, everybody uses Facebook. Keep in mind, these are just examples. And what's happening now, what you're seeing, of course, the fact that these companies are regressing when it comes to public opinion. A lot more people, I mean, 10 years ago, no one hated YouTube. You'd be hard pressed to find someone that does hate YouTube. Now, there are so many people out there that hate YouTube and that despise YouTube as well as Facebook for that plain and simple reason. Okay, they stop paying attention to pleasing their customers, and they started focusing on their own agenda. Okay, which is regressive to the public, of course, and regressive to their own income or their own profit. And yeah, it's safe to say that these companies have become completely corrupt and they become completely corrupt and whatnot. And it's the same thing for governments, for example. In governments of countries like the US, another example, and so on, governments or the so called bosses at the European Union, etc., etc. With them, it's also the same thing. Don't you agree? It's the same thing, literally the same thing. These entities have become so powerful to the point where it's almost as if, well, not almost, to a point where it's like corruption is inevitable. So it's kind of like a when a company is established and it starts reaching a certain level of success, then it's almost like a debt clock. It's like a timeline, or it's not a timeline, a deadline, or it's like a countdown to along the lines of when you're going to say, okay, let's see how long this one lasts before it all goes belly up. And when does it all go belly up? When it all goes belly up, the second that all of this stuff hits. To the largest extent, it also applies to civilizations. Okay, Rome was a notable example. Just giving an example, Rome was a notable example, but every major civilization in the world has known a rise and fall. Okay, the French had it too with Napoleon, the British had it, and sooner or later, that so called empire starts collapsing under its own weight. And it collapses because of internal struggle, political corruption on a massive scale or on massive scales. And again, the same thing applies to companies, it applies to any entity or establishment. The second that establishment grows to the point where it is to the point where it's international, or it grows to such an extent that it simply grows to such an extent, okay, then it's almost as if a downfall is unavoidable. Hence the saying, what goes up must come down. And it's always the same reason: internal corruption, you name it. I mean, the leaders within that establishment just being financially and otherwise corrupt and just abusing their power, whether it be simply stealing money out of the treasury or otherwise. It just goes on and on and on. And them simply doing what they want to do in the company, even if it's completely detrimental to the company's cause, to what made the establishment or the entity or that body of power the powerhouse it is today. So it's literally progressive, and then boom, when it becomes so large, it's like it can't sustain itself, and then it starts to regress. This applies to, like I said, this applies to everything: corporations, things that you see on a daily basis that pretty much all of us use. And I just want to know what people out there think, if anyone has an opinion, of course, if my viewers have an opinion on this matter. My question is simply, do you think that it's possible for an entity to continuously grow or grow to such an extent that it becomes international? Keep in mind, I'm talking about everything that you can consider an entity or a body of power, whether it's a company, whether it's a specific individual, whether it's countries on a political platform, so their governments primarily, and so on. But it seems to me, no, well, not it seems, it's history has proven it time after time. It seems like that is the case, and that is the case, and that no entity, it seems, or seemingly, we're talking about entities within human existence, can thrive continuously without at some point starting to begin the regressive cycle of downfall. It's a rise and fall, a continuous rise and fall, but this is not including the fact that the saying "what goes up must come down" applies, and that existence is a cycle, especially human existence is a cycle. So my question is simply, loosely put, do you think it's possible for an entity, it doesn't matter what kind of entity it is, to grow continuously to a point where it becomes exponentially powerful without collapsing on itself sooner or later, for the basic reasons that all of us know, either corruption and a series of regressive measures that basically seal its fate when it comes to its downfall? I've given notable examples, okay? It's always the case for all of these so-called entities. For civilizations, it's the same stuff always, okay? The government becomes completely corrupt, you name it. The martial prowess of that civilization decreases. That civilization is unable to defend its borders properly because of its lack of martial prowess not being present anymore or completely weakening. Um, illegal or unwise or contradictory immigration. Thereby, I mean bringing in immigrants that are basically enemies of that civilization and that dislike that civilization and only want to leech off of its resources. These are basic things, okay? Every civilization has that has experienced, every great civilization that has experienced a downfall has fallen because of all of these measures. It's like becoming so big to the point where you can't sustain yourself anymore, and then you simply collapse under your own weight. It's like someone becoming so fat to the point where that person's bones can't sustain that person's own weight, and before you know it, that person suffers from some kind of bone disease. uh, when it comes to his or her legs, you name it. I mean, it sounds weird, but yeah, it is a real thing. It is a real occurrence. So yeah, let me know what you think. If you think anything, if not, that's fine too. But my answer to my own question is no. It's not possible. Everything has a rise and fall. This even pertains to individuals, like I said. Notice that almost every major star in the world, by star I simply mean someone that has gained fame and fortune, but specifically fame, someone who was incredibly popular or revered for what he or she did or could do, regardless of what it was, someone that had genuine talent and creativity. For example, Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson, these are all notable figures. Um, it even applied to them. With Michael Jackson, he turned into Wacko Jacko. He was still arguably the king of pop, but his reputation became tainted. You know, after a while, Michael Jackson was at the peak of his career, and things went downhill from there. People claim that he lost his mind with all the stupid shit that he did, and they started calling him Wacko Jacko, and it just goes on. And yeah, that was pretty much the end of his career. He tried to revive his career, and he still had a cult-like following all over the world, but his mainstream popularity was over. No one really paid attention to Michael anymore. And it's the same thing for Michael Jordan. Keep in mind, these are all examples. I have nothing against these entities personally or these individuals. No, 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 no. No, Michael Jordan was the same thing. Michael Jordan was at the peak of his career, and everyone in the world knew Michael Jordan. Doesn't matter where you went, you could have gone to the Middle East. People knew Michael Jordan because I think he's one of the best basketballers in the history of mankind. I'm not even into basketball, but I only know of basketball's existence, to be honest, because of him and back then the all star team of Chicago Red Bulls and so on. And what happened to after the peak of his career? Instead of just bowing out gracefully, he just continued and he made a bunch of bad decisions and made the world just go, huh? To the point where he regressed to such a level where he was barely even, we're talking about loosely put, worth anything. He was no different than the average basketballer when he went to play for the Washington Wizards, I believe. You name it. He just completely faded into obscurity, but in a wrong way, because he didn't call it quits when he was supposed to, if you will. Of course, I'm sure he has his own reasons, or maybe it was just plain and simply money, despite the fact that he wasn't talented anymore. But my point is, again, what goes up must come down, and usually it does not happen in a good way. So, again, my question to my own answer on whether it's possible for an entity to grow exponentially without collapsing sooner or later under its own weight is no, plain and simply no. I've seen too many examples, and no. What goes up must come down, okay? The only thing you can do if you're an entity like that is to bow out gracefully and to openly admit that your time has come. It's the same thing with us as human beings as a cycle. You're at the peak of your life when you're my age, when you're in your 30s or 20s, even. In any case, between 20 and 40 years old, loosely put. And after that, it's downhill, you know. All you can do is just accept it. But some people have difficulty accepting it, and as a result, you get things like botched Botox procedures and people trying to, for example, when it comes to the physical part, pertaining to the physical part, they simply don't want to accept the fact that their bodies give away or start to give away, and they try to undertake unhealthy or abnormal, bluntly put, measures that make them, that make them look like total freaks. Again, bluntly put. In any case, they often get mocked for it. Instead of just, the only thing you can do is come to terms with reality, and that is that the sun's not always going to shine for you or for any other entity out there. Just accept that your time has come and that your decrease or decline in power or potency is inevitable, and that if that time has come, all you can do is just accept it, and again, bow out gracefully, and just admit it and let nature take its course, if you will, and accept the fact that that is going to happen, and go about it as gracefully and as decent as possible. But more often than not, especially power hungry entities like the ones I mentioned, a couple more to name a few, like the ones I mentioned to name a few, they are unwilling to let go of power. They're so used to being in power and having that kind of power and leverage that letting go is incredibly difficult, and that's what happens. It's the same thing for the example that I just highlighted, okay? For people, someone, a beautiful woman, for example, she's at the prime of her life. Basically, every man is throwing herself at her, and when she surpasses 40, she notices that they don't want her anymore because she's getting older, and in a desperate attempt to keep her figure perfect, she undertakes all kinds of surgeries. She goes under the knife repeatedly, and she ends up looking like a ridiculously skewed version of a grandma that is trying to look like someone in her 20s, and she still tries to bring back the magic, if you will, by wearing bikini sets and so on, and as a result she's mocked for it, of course. Sexy grandmas being thrown at her, mocking phrases or mockingly phrases. These are all examples, okay? That's an example of really doing things the wrong way. But my point in all of that, was simply that she simply did not want to bow out gracefully. She was unable to come to terms with reality, and the natural order of things is that her time has come, and that she's not a hot piece of ass anymore. She's not a beautiful woman and desirable woman to men anymore. And instead of just accepting it and moving on with her life and acting her age, she tries to do things the unnatural way or abnormal way, and it ends in disaster. So that's all. Let me know what you think if you want to. Bye.